after the lesson is 589. Next page, 589. Tonight is looking at John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18, in a lesson that, yes, you do see that correctly. I've entitled WWJD, but not what would Jesus do, but what would Judas do? And we have one of the most, I think one of the most misunderstood New Testament Bible stories. Of course, it doesn't do us any good when. Now, I'm a fan of the show. I like it. I've enjoyed it, and I feel like it has been beneficial as I've watched the show that was made about the life of Jesus, The Chosen. But of all the episodes that I've seen where they have reenacted things that were in the Scripture, the heart behind John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18 is the one that I feel they have failed the most on. And you'll see that as we look at it today of why I believe that. It's not picking on them or anything, but it just doesn't. It seems like they missed the boat on their interpretation. Let's read the text, and then we will look at the passage together. After these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered, waiting for the moving of the waters, for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in, was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. A man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, Get up, pick up your pallet, and walk." Immediately the man became well, picked up his pallet, and began to walk. Now it was the Sabbath on that day. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Pick up your pallet and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Pick up your pallet and walk'?" But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God." All right, so my first point is a simple one to begin us on the road again. Verse 1. After these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So after what things? Well, John's just making a quick reference to after Jesus went and did his short ministry, few days of ministry in Samaria. And then after that, we saw last week that he traveled north and into Galilee, and he went to Nazareth first, and then he went up to Capernaum, and was in that region, in that area, doing ministry. After those things, it says, then there was a feast of the Jews. Now, I will tell you this, of all the feasts that are listed, that are named in the Gospels, this is the only one that is unknown. We don't know which feast this was. Of course, scholars argue about it, but there's no sense in that. We don't know which one it was. So we know that there were multiple feasts throughout the year. We know it wasn't the Passover, but there were multiple feasts throughout the year, and we're not sure exactly which one Jesus was traveling to go to, but it was one of the feasts. And again, we've pointed this out many times, but as always, he's way up there in the north, but he's traveling south, but it's always up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem sits in the mountains, sits up high. Many hard hiking miles. That's the way I always think about it when I read about these things. I can't help as a hiker and a backpacker to envision what it was like to literally follow Jesus. Now, I know these were people that walked most everywhere that they went for the most part, but still yet, Jesus, remember, they were in Jerusalem a couple chapters back, and they traveled hiked up to Samaria, and this is all hill country. This is all uphill, downhill, hard walking for the most part. And then they traveled up here, traveled all the way as far north as he possibly could, really, in Israel. And now he's traveling all the way back. So to follow Jesus was a physically taxing thing to do, on top of everything else that he challenged his disciples towards spiritually. It was physically demanding to follow Jesus. Next point, the multitude. The multitude. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda. It's called a few other things too. There's a few different spellings of this, so you may see those different spellings. They all come from the same Greek word, though. It's just how do we transliterate that word into English, and that's why you have the different spellings of which basically ends up being the same word, Bethesda. Having 5 porticos. In these lay a multiple, and porticos would be like a pool. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, or a portico is like a columned area with a porch, pillars. Yeah, the word portico literally means porch, but their porches all had pillars and a roofed area. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered. Now, notice there's some brackets that are inserted. I don't know if they're in your Bible or not. They're in my Bible. But some brackets are there, and I'll talk about those in a second. So then enter some brackets. Waiting for the moving of the waters, for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. So this word multitude is the Greek plethos. It's where we get our word plethora from. Just means a whole lot. This is a place where there were a whole lot of people. Okay, so for the brackets, anytime you see something in your Bible that has brackets around it like that, what that means is that in the earliest manuscripts that we have, and the earliest manuscripts just means as close to the original manuscript when John wrote it as possible, because all we have is copies after copies after copies all these years. When something is in brackets like that, it means that in those early manuscripts, that was not written there. Okay? So in the original and the oldest book of John that we have, verse 3 ends, in these days lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered. Period. Nothing else after that. None of this explanation. Why this can be troublesome is because people will read that and go, wait a minute. So there was this angel that came down at different times a year, and after the water, and stirred up the water, and if someone got in, then the first person in was healed by this angel. Like, that just seems like a strange thing. It seems out of place in the Bible. Well, what some well-meaning Jewish person did, Jewish scribe, is they said, you know what? I bet people in Rome that are reading this don't understand why these people were waiting around this pool like that. So I'm going to write a note in there explaining what the people believed the pool was, and and why the people were gathered around there. So that's what this is. It's a note of explanation for why the people were there. So say if it's not in the earliest manuscripts, why include it? Well, that's a good question. I don't have any problem throwing it out personally. However, I do like that it's there because I like the word of explanation. However, it's important for us to know that this was a superstition. It was not a reality. Here's a picture of what it's imagined. Now, this is not a real picture. This is an imagined picture. They have like a north wall, which is easy enough to know what it was. But here is what the imagined pool of Bethesda was inside the temple grounds. And you can check out a lot of really neat stuff archaeologically online, like on YouTube, that talk about the pool of Bethesda and like where it was located. Because for years people said, well, we don't believe that it's there because we can't find it or where it was. But just a little bit more digging, and they have located what they believe it was. They still don't know exactly. They just know where it was close to. So, a seemingly strange question. A man who was there had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, Jesus said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" That's an odd question, huh? Person laying there. A man, Jewish by implication, because believe me, if he's not Jewish, John's going to let us know that. But one of many, one of a multitude. So Jesus comes to this place, and there is a multitude of people at this place wanting this superstitious thing to happen where the water gets agitated so that the first one in can be healed by this angel. We don't have any idea how long the man has been there. It's just important that we read the scripture as it reads. It's the only reason I say that. Note that it says that the man had been ill for 38 years, not that he had been laying next to this, not coming to this place for 38 years. We don't know how long he had been coming here or how long he had been here. Let's get to the heart of the question, though. Why ask an ill person if they want to get well? Yeah. And that's, Tom said, because you'd have to go to work. Not all, now that seems like a crazy thing to most of us, but not all ill people want to be well. And if you've lived long enough, unfortunately, you've known some of these people before. But that is, what a question that is for Jesus to ask. Do you wish to get well? Well is this Greek word hugais, which means to be made whole. Now, it has a lot of different meanings in your, it's translated a lot of different ways in your New Testament. This word hugais is not only translated into the word well, it could also be read, do you wish to get normal? Or do you wish to be restored? Do you wish to be healed? There's well. Do you wish for good health? Do you wish to be sound? All kind of the same general idea, But that's the word that Jesus uses when he says, do you wish to get well? My next point, that's not an answer. Look what he says. So imagine someone asks you the question, do you wish to get well? The man answered him. The sick man answered Jesus, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. It was a yes or no question. So it drives me crazy with my kids sometimes. I'll ask them a yes or no question, and I'll get everything but a yes or no a yes or no answer. And but what a strange question, but an even stranger answer. Sir or Lord, this is respectful, so he is treating Jesus with respect. But when he says sir, or if your version says Lord, it just means sir, like Lord of the manor. But it's only respectful, the polite sense. Like he doesn't know who he's talking to here. This is the first hint that we have in the text. Now, you've probably studied it before, so you probably know what's going on with this guy. But this is the first time we get an idea about what his condition is. He can't go down steps without assistance. He has no one to put him into the pool when the water is stirred. He says here, I have no man. That word man is the generic word for mankind. So no person is probably a better way to translate that. I have no one to put me into the water. When he says, I have no one, what's he saying? He's saying he needs help. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's not a direct request, but it's probably a request. Jesus says, you want to get well? I don't have anyone to help me. Like, are you offering? Are you offering to carry me down there, when the time comes? Or what else is he saying when he says that he doesn't have anyone? Yeah, no family. Yeah, he's literally saying, I don't have anyone. I'm alone, and I'm helpless, sitting here. Now, somebody put him here, though. We don't know who that is, but somebody's carried him here and put him here. But having carried him here and put him here, they left. So here he is. An interesting miracle. All miracles are interesting, but some more interesting than others for different reasons. Verses 8 and 9, Jesus said to him, now look, so Jesus says, do you want to get well? The guy says, I don't have anyone to take me down to the water. Jesus says, get up, pick up your pallet and walk. Now, did that guy ask to be healed? No. Immediately, the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. A lot of interesting things here. In the face of false hope, I want you to see this first. In the face of false hope, Jesus simply says, get up. Like, I don't want to hear any of this ridiculousness. I don't want to hear about this superstitious stuff. This is an insult to me. It's an insult to my Father. It's an insult to the temple that this superstitious thing is even going on in this vicinity. He says, get up. Also, I want you to notice this, and this is the same for this and all of Jesus' miracles. I always feel like it's important to point things like this out. I'll tell you why. All of Jesus' miracles are immediate. Have you ever heard someone talk to you about slow miracles or gradual miracles? Biblically speaking, there's no such thing as gradual miracles. Slow to happen miracles, or gradually being healed miraculously. When it's done by God, it's done immediately. Okay? And the only reason I say that is because within the realm of Christianity, I'm not going to call names, pick on anybody, but there are certain people within the realm of Christianity that talk about these gradual miracles. If you go to their church, you can have one of those gradual miracles. Of course, it's like, how long is it going to last? Well, keep coming. Keep coming. It's just a ploy to give people false hope. And when Jesus did a miracle, he did it. When God did a miracle in the Old Testament, he did it. There's none of it. When Paul and Peter did miracles in the New Testament that we read about, they were instantaneous. Everything that comes from God is. This miracle, also I want you to see this, had nothing to do with the faith of the crippled man. Did this man, was he healed because of his great faith in Jesus? No, he didn't even know who Jesus was. To him, he doesn't even know Jesus is a teacher or a prophet. I mean, he isn't even, he called him sir, because some guy that walked up to him and started talking to him. That's all Jesus is to him. So without any faith in Jesus and who he is, Jesus performs the miracle in the face of faithlessness at this point. Now, I want you to understand, church, that anytime Jesus does something like this, and there's a few occasions where we'll see things similar to this, he has a point. He has a purpose behind it, a very specific thing. And hopefully that we'll see that come to the surface as we continue. So, why did Jesus do this miracle for this man? That's what I was just saying. Seek. Let's continue to seek, and we will find. One other thing, I added a final thought on this one. I want you to notice this. When Jesus says, every single time Jesus gives a command in the New Testament, whether it be to a person, whether it be to a demon, whether it be to Satan himself, he cannot be refused. When Jesus says to do something, if Jesus came here right now and said, you get up, believe me, you would have no choice in the matter. Your body would stand you up whether you wanted to or not. This isn't a matter of when Jesus commands something, it is not a matter of the will. When the Lord said, let there be light, there was no choice in the matter. Jesus has complete command over all the elements and over all creation, including us. So when Jesus says, get up, the guy had no choice. He got up. He said, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. All three of those things are deliberate. Every single thing that Jesus said, he doesn't waste a word. The spiritually blind is our next point, the spiritually blind. Now it was the Sabbath on that day, finishing verse 9. And that's where we start to get to the heart of what's going on here, as John's explaining this to us. Here we have this great miracle, and John immediately tells us it was the Sabbath that day. That should start making some red flags and alarms go off in our head. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, it is the Sabbath, and it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet. Now, we know that when John refers to the Jews, he's always referring to the unbelieving, rebellious leaders. That's who he always refers to as the Jews. Even John's a Jew himself. So of all the things to say, of all the things they could say when they see this guy who's been crippled all this time, why say this? Of all the things, why say that? They didn't care about him. Oh, isn't that terrible? But that's just the truth of the matter. Remember the guy said, I have no one. I have no one. No one cares about him. So you take someone who no one cares about, but everyone knows who he is. No one cares about him, and a miracle is done to that person. Believe me, a miracle happening to a person that no one cares about is not going to endear people to that person. And it doesn't here either. But also, of course, it's in my point too. I called it this point the spiritually blind. How blind, spiritually blind, do you have to be for something wonderful to happen right before your eyes and you notice something else? The wrong reaction is the next point. The wrong reaction. Verse 11, but the man, here's the man here, he answered them, he who made me well was the one who said to me, pick up your pallet and walk. They asked him, who is the man who said to you, pick up your pallet and walk? Notice, what a weird thing. Notice they didn't say, who cured you, who healed you. They said, "Who told you to pick up your pallet?" They don't care who cured him. They don't care that he's cured. It's probably the only thing. I mean, probably what he's most excited about. It's got to be. Verse 13, but the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away. And just had that miraculous way of doing that when he wanted to. Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Why didn't the man know who Jesus was? I mean, after Jesus told him to pick up his pallet and walk, and the guy picked up his pallet and walked, why didn't the guy know who Jesus was afterward?
Seems like most other miracles, there's a secondary reaction of like, who are you? Like asking Jesus who he is and what or a reaction to that, how it's done, and we don't see that in this miracle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's probably just as simple as, well, for one, like Levi said, it's like we see that in other places too, where it's like a secondary reaction of, could this guy be a prophet, or could he be the Son of God, or, but I think it just comes down to as simple as he didn't ask. He didn't ask him what his name was. So when they asked him, they said, "What was the guy's name that did this?" "I don't know." Basically you see this scene where Jesus heals the guy. He gets up. The people around him had to notice that this miracle just happened. All those people in that vicinity probably trying to figure out, hey, how do we make a line to ask him to heal us? Because of all those people that they were there, Jesus only healed this one. He didn't heal everybody that was there. He didn't heal all the crippled people that were there. Just the one. So, tells us a few things. Did this man understand that the leaders didn't like Jesus? Yeah. He does. He points the finger at Jesus, doesn't he? They're like, "What are you doing? You're breaking the law of the Sabbath." And he's like, well, he told me to do it. Who? Who told you to do it? "Oh, I don't know his name." It's a weird, the whole thing is just weird. Have you ever saw someone like or heard this story, though, painted as this beautiful picture of Jesus healing somebody? Yeah. Because that's what people when they read this story, what we do is we project what the guy should have been like, what we would have been like in this same instance. But if we look at the text and what it actually says, it's not what he was. Did the man understand? Okay, I already said that. Did the man understand the leaders didn't like Jesus? Yes. I don't know how I went backwards. The best thing, my next point. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple. So Jesus, I don't know how much longer after this is, but later on, Jesus finds this guy that he healed in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well." I'll be dog. "Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." Ooh. That's a pretty... Church, it's very easy to just read through that and not see the extreme, the boldness behind that. Have you ever said to someone, "Hey, that's a wonderful thing happened to you today"? You're like, yeah, it did. "Why don't you do yourself a favor and stop sinning?" Yikes! These are bold words, but in all this New Age stuff of people trying to paint, Jesus was just loving and he was just accepting and he accepted people right where they were. And no, yeah, he met people where they were, but he refused to leave them there. And Jesus always confronted sin. And he was fearless in his confrontation of sin. Now, he was kind and gentle, and we can't make the argument that he wasn't loving to this guy. He healed this guy. I mean, he's just gave this guy his life back. What's worse than not being able to walk for 38 years? Probably a lot of things, but what's way worse? How about hell for all eternity? Yeah, that's worse. That's worse. Why does Jesus tell the man to not sin anymore?
My mind goes back to what I said earlier is, you know, he didn't really say anything to Jesus afterwards, so he just confronted him and just kind of laid it all out there, you know. Just kind of gave him one of those stern sayings.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, he certainly does that.
He knew things about the man we don't know.
Yeah, he knew things about the man that we don't know. The scripture doesn't tell us exactly, but believe me, if Jesus says to a person, hey, you've become well, now don't sin anymore, he obviously had a sin problem in his life that was tied directly to his being crippled for the last 38 years. We don't know exactly, but we can imagine. We can imagine a person who's been crippled for the last 38 years, maybe sinning in a way of blaming God, maybe sinning in a sense of you know, not making the most of his life, feeling sorry for himself. Now it could be something else. But Jesus says, hey, you had a problem, something that you've probably said was your problem your whole life. That problem is now solved. Now you can stop sinning. But the bottom line is he had a sin issue in his life. And Jesus said, because if you don't, and this is a loving warning as well, so that nothing worse happens to you than these last 38 years of your life. How does the man take Jesus' suggestion, or his command rather? Seek and find. Let's look. And this is the tragedy of the story. It's not a happy ending story. Not all things that appear on the surface to be good end up being good. Verse 15 and 16, the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Now, why would he go and do that? They'd already talked to him. The religious leaders didn't have any more use for him. You think it may have made him mad when Jesus told him to not sin anymore? The man sided with the religious leaders, not with Jesus. When Jesus finds the man and confronts the man about his sin, his reaction is not to repent and follow Jesus. His reaction is to go find men that he knows despise Jesus and tell them who he is. That's where I get the sermon title, WWJD, What Would Judas Do? What does this teach us about the healing of the body? Several things is left. I mean, this thing is just rich, but what does this teach us about the healing of the body? Just because you heal the body does not mean that your mind, your heart are healed. It does nothing for the soul. You can be physically healed. The analogy works both ways too. You could be you could be a person on this planet that has the physical fitness of a professional athlete, perfectly healthy from head to toe on the outside, with a damned soul on the inside. Your physical, the physical and the spiritual are not connected. There's nothing in the law of Moses that says that miracles cannot be performed on the Sabbath. This is one of the things that they hold against Jesus. But there's nothing in the Old Testament law that says that a miracle can't be done on the Sabbath. And it wasn't even wrong to pick up a mat and carry it on the Sabbath. You're not going to find that restriction in there either. However, the Jewish leaders added all those extra rules to make the Sabbath even harder to keep than it was before. But all this stuff in Jesus' day, and even those Jews that still observe the Sabbath today, they've missed the point. The point was to focus on God, to have a day that you worshiped and were in fellowship and were in communion with your Creator. Did you know that if you go to out, and I was going to get to see this, but I didn't get to go to Jerusalem, so you can cry with me about that after church. I probably never get to go now. But if you go to a city building in Jerusalem today that has elevators in it, the elevators in Jerusalem are special elevators. They are made to whether you push the buttons or not, they just go from one floor to the next, and then they start all over without pushing a button. Why do you think they do that? Because they believe that it is a sin, it is work to push an elevator button on the Sabbath. Is that missing the point, or is that missing the point? Right? Jesus, in this whole miracle, the point of this miracle was, now he was compassionate toward this man. Jesus never saw a person as just a commodity, as just a person as a tool to be used for his disposal. Jesus tried to help this man. He helped him in a physical sense. He tried to help him in a spiritual sense, and he rejected Jesus. But that wasn't the point of the miracle. There were all those people there he could have healed, and he didn't. He just healed the one, and it was for this reason. It was the Sabbath. Jesus provoked the leadership of Jerusalem on purpose. Now, why would he do that? Part of the plan. That's right. That's right. I don't pretend to understand. I try as best I can to, but I don't pretend to understand the providence of God and the way that he works things out. But in order for the Old Testament to be fulfilled, and in order for the Jews to kill Jesus, for him to be a sacrifice, as it all had to work out, they had to have a reason to kill him. It's just amazing the reasons that they did want to kill him. They wanted to kill him ultimately for things like this, because he broke their rules, not God's rules. And he claimed to be God. The intended result. Things always work out the way Jesus wants them to, as he intends when he has a plan. Verse 17, but he answered them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Breaking the Sabbath when John says this, I want you to understand this. John's not saying that Jesus broke the Sabbath. He's saying that it was their interpretation that he broke the Sabbath. This was according to them. In actuality, Jesus never broke one of God's commands. Also, in the face of miracle power, the religious leaders remain blind. Jesus, performing a miracle, healing a man who's been crippled for 38 years, did nothing to cause them to say, maybe this guy is the Son of God. Maybe he is the Messiah we've been waiting for. But not only did they remain blind, the previously crippled man remains blind. We never hear about this guy ever again. We don't even know his name. John doesn't even tell us his name. Why? Because it's a tragic story. He's not a hero of the faith. All right. Well, thank you for hanging with me through the lesson tonight. I appreciate the comments and all. And we always offer an invitation for anyone who has reason to respond. If it's convenient for you, let's stand as we sing number 589. If you have a reason to come forward, then come on up as we sing.